What's up guys, Cameron here from Drums and Drams, and today I have a very special two-part video for all of you. I actually talked about this in this week's episode of the Weekly Dram, but if you didn't happen to catch that, what we're gonna be doing today is first, I'm gonna nose, taste, and review this Jack Daniel's single barrel proof rye whiskey, one of the most talked about bottles of 2023 in my opinion. And second, I'm actually gonna perform something for all of you. Now, in my daily life, I'm a professional percussionist, which is why I named the channel Drums and Drams. Yes, I play drum set, but I also play in a symphony orchestra here in Columbus, Ohio, and I tour around as a solo artist. And for a while now, I wanted to bring just a little something musical to the channel to see what you guys think of it. And no, I'm not gonna do this every day or every week. At most, it would be once a month. So fear not, Drums and Drams is not gonna turn into performance videos and scotch reviews like some people have been worried about. But I thought as the channel's been growing so much recently, we could try a little something new. And if you hate it, please be kind, let me know in the comments section. And if you love it, let me know that as well. If you have any suggestions on how I can do this better, I really value your feedback, especially as I'm making decisions for the channel moving forward in this really awesome time of growth for Drums and Drams. If I am going to bring a little musical element into the channel, I want to do it in a meaningful way. I want to make sure that the whiskey and the music are almost like a pairing. And so for Jack Daniel's, I had to kind of think about what would work with this. But the brand has such a strong connection to Frank Sinatra. We all know the Sinatra Select bottling, and you can read about kind of the lore and the connection between the brand and this kind of iconic jazz artist. But because that connection exists, it's only right that I play something a little jazzy and a little bluesy for all of you. So in the second half of this video, what I'm gonna play is a vibraphone solo entitled Blues for Gilbert. And if you don't know what a vibraphone is, that's okay. It's basically a metal xylophone with a pedal so that you can sustain notes like a piano. If you've never heard of it, it sounds unfamiliar. You might hear the sound of it as I'm playing and you might realize that you recognize it because it is kind of an iconic jazz sound. But let's not talk about that anymore. We have to talk about this whiskey before we get to what might be the most exciting or the least exciting part of this video. I don't know, you let me know in the comments section. As with all of these single barrel products, I just wanna let you know, you gotta take this review with a grain of salt because I've heard that these Jack single barrels can vary pretty widely, especially the ryes. I don't know if that's true. My bottle's coming in at 135.7 proof, which is 67.85% ABV. Price point, about 65 or 70 bucks, so a great value buy for a bottle that was a special release just a few years prior from Jack Daniel's, and then they made it this shelf version, and that's just really exciting. So let's get into this now. Let's check it out on the nose. Cheers, guys. I just wanna give a first impression up front, which is that this is a big, bold, juicy, and it's not a shy whiskey. It's very strong. It's jumping out of the glass. It's exciting to smell a whiskey like this. And yes, there are signature Jack Daniel's notes in here, but there's also a lot of stuff that's kind of unusual and kind of exciting and fun about this whiskey. I'm gonna break this down in a couple of layers. Maybe 4 layers is gonna be the best way to talk about this whiskey because there's just so much going on in the glass. All right, so the first layer, I wanna go kind of from top to bottom. So the top notes on this whiskey, I would say are the least exciting, lowest quality part of the whiskey. And let me kind of clarify what I mean by that. So let me give you the notes first. Yes, there is that kind of bright Jack Daniel's banana runt note. Okay, big dose of ethanol. You would expect that from what is presumably a young product from Jack Daniel's with kind of an accelerated aging, it feels like. You're gonna get that ethanol. There's also a little bit of like a bubblegum note on here. So that makes it feel younger. The banana makes it feel younger. There's that ethanol. So the top part of this is not necessarily my favorite. And the last thing I wanna say about that kind of top layer is that there is that acetone note. I talked about this in my Old Forester 1924 review, and you get this on some Brown-Forman products. There's this fingernail polish remover acetone note. So this top layer is something that when I smell this whiskey, I just wanna get beneath it. And that's when it really starts to open up and shine. But first impression is like, yeah, this is a big bombastic whiskey, but let's get past that top note. Just underneath that, again, this is where we start to get into exciting territory. So let me tell you about what I would call like layer 2, which is kind of like the lighter fruits and the spice profile. The spice notes in here as a rye whiskey from Jack Daniel's. It's not coming off minty, it's not coming off herbal dill. This is really a cinnamon and pepper forward rye with a lot of just big kind of oak spice notes. So I love that about this rye, and I think that's why this appeals to so many bourbon drinkers, is that you get those bourbon kind of spices as opposed to those really herbal, minty, rye driven spices. Now beneath this kind of spice lighter layer, we're gonna get into what I would call layer 3. I know this is maybe a dumb way to analyze the whiskey, but it's the best I can come up with right now on the spot. Layer 3 for me is the backbone of the whiskey. There's a big kind of toasty middle to this. To me, it's almost like the burnt edges of chocolate chip cookies when you get them out of the oven. This almost burnt toastiness, big maple notes, big brown sugar notes. Again, I said chocolate chip cookie. That's correct. Pie crust, chocolate, maple, brown sugar. Notes that I guess I'm not totally used to in a lot of Jack Daniel's products. Yes, you get it on the single barrel proof Tennessee whiskey / bourbon, but on other products, you really think bright, you really think banana. This has a lot of depth to it once you get past that top layer, and that's one thing that I really love about it. And finally, let's get into kind of the base of the whiskey. Yeah, the base of this one is a leathery oak, but it also has just a hint of this kind of minerality to it. And I don't mean in a George Dickel way. It's not that gross Flintstone vitamin thing, but there is almost like a gravel or like pebble kind of thing going on in here. It almost reminds me of some wines that you drink. Like when people talk about different kinds of minerality in wine, I think it's kind of a concept that's talked about a little too much, to be honest. But this has kind of this gravelly thing along with the oak, and also in this kind of bottom base layer of the whiskey, there are big dark fruit notes, juicy blackberry, juicy plum. So this covers a lot of territory. And I know I kind of went full nerd mode right now, but it is what it is. This whiskey, when you sit down with it and you actually spend time, you don't just sip it, which is what we're gonna do here in just a second. If you don't just sip it and shoot it back, there are so many things going on in this bottle, and that's really exciting for me. So let's get it on the palate now. Cheers. So this whiskey is basically heartburn in a glass. You wanna take small sips of this one. Such a long palate development, such a long finish going on right now. You don't need very much. It does go a long way. Now, what's interesting is at the front of the palate, I get a big fruit punch up front before the spice actually kicks in. It's like ethanol and fruit, so that bubblegum note and then all of those dark fruits I talked about, kind of like the top layer and the bottom layer hit you at once up front, and then what actually carries the whiskey back as soon as that punch happens is all of that kind of cinnamon, pepper, oak spice that I talked about. Once you get mid-palate going, that's where the whiskey, it does a couple of weird things. First off, there's this flash of those chocolate chip cookie, those kind of base notes, maple, brown sugar, those things kick in, but then there's a sourness that comes in as well. So you're dealing with spice, you're dealing with this fruit spice combo up front, then as it rolls back, you get this sweetness, this kind of baked goods, pie crust, maple, brown sugar sweetness, along with sour, dark fruit. And as it gets into the finish, that's where the spice hangs out and you start to feel some of that leathery oak. It's a roller coaster of a whiskey, and I can see why so many people love this stuff. I think it's overall a very good pour. Yes, it's very rough around the edges in terms of the ethanol, those top notes, top layers that I talked about. But once you get past that, once you get a few sips in, you're definitely gonna be feeling the buzz at that point. But once you get a few sips in and you get past those things, it is a really, really nice whiskey. And I'm sure this thing would hold up over ice. It's something that you can sip on all night long. And we're gonna do one more sip here before we move on to our performance of the video. So a pretty consistent second sip for this whiskey. As my palate has now acclimated to the proof and the intensity, I'm able to notice that yes, the experience kind of remains consistent from sip to sip, but there is a little improvement in the cohesion of the whiskey as it develops from front to back. What I mean by that is the first sip felt a little isolated, a little pointillistic, so you get sweet, spicy, sour, fruity, and it takes a while for them to come together. But the second sip for me, it happened much sooner on the front of the palate, and it rolled back kind of as a unit and developed just a little bit better. Now, along with that development, I did pick up a few additional notes. I know I'm going note crazy in this video, but I'm having fun with it, so bear with me. First up, roasted almond. I love it. It adds a little complexity. Second would be a little bit of a spearmint note. And this is the first time throughout the nosing, throughout sipping this whiskey, that I'm actually recognizing that I'm drinking a rye. Everything else has felt very bourbon-like, so it's stylistically appropriate. I like that. But there are two notes in the finish that I'm not a big fan of. One, acetone, we already talked about it, and two would be kind of like this lemon pledge furniture polish note. It feels a little chemical, a little artificial, and I'm definitely not a big fan of that. So all of this proves to me that this whiskey has a great place in the market. It occupies a great place at 65 bucks with the stats, single barrel, barrel proof. It is a really nice option in the market, but it is rough around the edges. It does have room to grow, and I don't know if the point of this whiskey is really to be anything other than what it is, which is just this rip your face off brash experience for proof hounds that want a whiskey that is gonna play along with their Elijah Craig barrel proofs, not even their rare breeds. That's only 116.8. I mean, you're really talking whiskeys that are like Stag Junior, Elijah Craig barrel proof level. When you think of proof and you think of experience, it's gonna be similar to this. I think it does that well. I think for 65 bucks, I would definitely recommend picking one up. But with it being a single barrel, you kind of never know what you're gonna get. Experiment with water, see if you can round things out a bit. It might even do well over ice, who knows? But now we're going to move on to a performance, like I talked about, of Blues for Gilbert. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope if you're sipping this Jack Daniels or any other whiskey, you'll sip along as I play. It's a little less than 5 minutes. So enjoy and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Cheers, and I'll see you guys next time here on Drums and Drams.